Your Honor, may it please the court.
Well, we are recording, so now's
We
an
are.
appropriate time to say, may it please the court.
May it please the court. Judge Cunningham, it's a pleasure to appear before you.
All right, and welcome. This is our continuation of our legacy interview series for the Collier County Bar Association. And our next guest today really goes without saying. It's John Cardillo. He's one of the legends and the legal greats here in Collier County, and he has been here for a very long time. This is a special interview for me because I grew up in the same neighborhood as John, and I used to see him walking his dog all the time, and I thought that he was just the epitome of who I wanted to be as a lawyer. So this is a great person to interview. Means a lot to me. I know he's been a part of the bar for a long time. He's been one of the founders of the Inns of Court, one of the first founders and only remaining founders with Ed Sheffy of our local Inns of Court here in Collier County. And he's headed professionalism committees. He's headed a lot of other committees with the bar dealing with health and mental health and awareness for attorneys. And I'm going to let him briefly introduce himself for a quick 30-second blurb of who you are and what you do, John.
Thank you. I have seen Eric, let's say, grow up in Pine Ridge. He was always a good-looking guy who was always working, and I'm really proud of what you've become, seriously.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'm John Cardillo. I'm an attorney in Naples, still practicing, although I'm not practicing as fully as I used to. I'm part of, it's actually, I work for my son John at Cardillo Law. And I've had a trial practice for about 49 of the 50 some odd years I've been practicing. I got admitted to the bar in South Carolina, where I went to law school and college in 1968, and admitted in New York in 1970, and came here in 1972.
Okay, well, let's start at the beginning. What is it that first made you want to become a lawyer?
I think I was eased into it. I had an uncle, my father's brother, who was a maritime lawyer in New York, and everybody referred to him. And on one side, on the Cardillo side, and there was other people on my mother's side that we were dynamic and referred to. And actually it caused a little problem in my decision-making. The left side, my mother's side, let's say, they were all professors, a lot of PhDs and things like that, and I always thought professorhood was a terrific endeavor. On the other side, my father's side, there was a lawyer who was quite prominent in his field. I ended up, you look at my yearbook or all these other things, it says to be a lawyer, so I guess I was going to be a lawyer whether I knew it or not.
Well, we're glad you became a lawyer. So you can talk about what it was like in Collier County in the early years of your practice here.
I certainly could. I came here in 72. There were 50 to 60 lawyers in town, half of whom weren't practicing. They had come from other areas just hanging up a shingle and for something to do. So of the remaining lawyers, it was a small bar. Maybe 30 or 40 were active practicing attorneys.
And what year are we talking about here?
When I got here, it was 1972. But in 1969, I came down for my grandmother's funeral. And my grandfather, who moved to Naples in 1954, and was a persuasive person, kept sending me postcards of the Bank of Naples while I was in law school saying, thinking of you, or a picture of the bank, and said, someday you will put your money here. And the third one was, this is a growing town for a growing young man to practice. Well, I was in New York, and big deal. But I came down in 69, and my future partner, Dan Monaco, was a disciple of my grandfather. He saw him every day for coffee. And my grandfather said, this is a fellow you want to think about practicing. I know you're up there with your father's brother, but this is a place for a young lawyer. And when I came to this funeral, I met Dan. I said, I think my grandfather's right. And so I eventually, after passed the bar in Florida, I moved here in 72. And never had a boring day here. If I wanted to get back to New York to enjoy what it was that I wasn't enjoying in New York, I just get on a plane and go. And it was a sense of freedom. I think the smallness of the town didn't bother me. And I was familiar with Naples since I have been visiting since the 50s.
Do you remember your very first case or client? And if so, what is it that stands out to you about that?
Among the first clients was a man named Joel Garcia. Joel Garcia was, at that time, the field crew leader over at Lippman's tomato area. I had just come down from an Admiralty practice. I thought he was coming off a boat. I really did. And so he comes in, he's 300 and some odd pounds, big cowboy hat. And I realized that he was not a sailor or from a ship. He was the crew leader for groups of workers, farm workers. His problem was that he had a truck that was uninsured that was in an accident in Tennessee, and what could I do about it? Ironically, 40 years later, Joel Garcia comes back into my office with the identical problem, the identical hat, and he was now 400 pounds. But Joel was the king of the workers out in there, and we represented most of the Garcias. It was a privilege. And when it was time to eat, the food was very good.
It has to be. Now, you've been a mentor to many of us lawyers over the years. Were there any mentors for you that stand out in your mind?
Certainly Dan was. He was several years older. He had been here for a few years. And people loved Dan. And I could see why. And he was a very ethical, hardworking, prepared lawyer with a very strong sense of justice. Another mentor was Judge Smith, Harold Smith. He was the circuit judge. He happened to know my grandfather, so he took a cotton to me. And he always made me remember that my obligation was to my client. And it didn't matter whether you were pulled apart or pulled aside by other temptations or whatever. Your obligation was to your client. And I think those two people had a strong influence on my attitude in court and my preparation.
That's great. Is there any particular moment that stands out in your mind as a moment where you said, aha, this is exactly why I became a lawyer?
Okay. First, I was in a quandary as to whether to become a lawyer. I was in graduate school. After I went to Furman, undergraduate up in South Carolina, and then I got an assistantship up in West Virginia. And while I was there, I met a man, Irving Stewart, who happened to have been president of West Virginia and a close friend of President Lyndon Johnson before Johnson ever was president, when they were both from Texas and things like that. So I went to see him I couldn't make up my mind. Do I get a PhD for political science or become a lawyer? And he said that his son had the same problem, and he ended up being a lawyer for Rockefeller. The ironic part was he got a call from Defense Secretary, I forgot what his name was, whoever was the Defense Secretary under Johnson, and was told that the president wanted him to be on a particular committee, and he said respectfully, no, I cannot do that. While I'm sitting there, another phone call comes in. It was the president, and said, I need you on this committee. And he said, yes, sir, Mr. President. I'll never forget this. Well, anyway, because his son was able to make a decision, I decided I better, and the war was raging at that time, Vietnam, 1966. People were getting drafted. I said, I better go to law school now if I could. And so I applied. And I never did get that PhD. I never even finished the master's thesis. But I knew I didn't make a mistake. My thinking of practicing law, particularly in a smaller town, was it had a greater impact on society than if you were a professor, that's all. You could do more things. More people would listen to you or rely on you. And that's really how I decided to become a lawyer.
And you can help a lot of people, and you've helped
That was
a lot
the
of people
whole
throughout
idea.
your
You
career.
could do it. And in Naples at that time, there was a need for a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the most impactful thing was I was president of the bar in 1975, 76. And they had, the bar convention was coming up in Orlando, and they had a program, an award for 4 different things for the best bars. And we put together a program, what we had done that year and a half. Best bar, best best all-around bar, best newsletter, best special project, and something else. And we submitted our application. I went to the bar conference, and the first one was best newsletter, Collier County Bar. I walked up in front of 200, 300 people, got that award, went back, and then that's best organized bar. And the next one was the best special project. Each one I walked up for, we were winning. We won. In fact, when after the third one, and Rex Farrier was the president at the time, and there's a picture of it in the bar headquarters. He said, "Do you want to stay up for the 4th one?" I said, "No, I want to walk up for that." And there were all these guys from Fort Myers sitting next to me, and they were it. Fort Myers was it at the time, and they were cordial in the fact that Collier County actually won best bar in the state at that time.
That's amazing. What an
It
achievement.
certainly had an effect on my thinking that there were a lot of things you could do.
Mm-hmm.
And with a little notoriety, if you were involved in something, people would rely on you.
That's actually a really good segue into our next section. So we want to talk a little bit about the history of the Collier County Bar itself. And when you think about the CCBA, are there any traditions that define it to you?
Well, in a way, yes. First of all, we had and I'm talking about afterwards, we had a lot of initiative to start things like the fee arbitration that the state started. We started one long before that. Our local fee arbitration. In fact, I was the first victim of the fee arbitration. Fortunately, I won, but it was legitimate. It was quite legitimate. Mentoring. We started mentoring long before the state bar organized their program. Kathy Pasadomo and others and I started the mentoring program, and we would get calls from judges and say, would you talk to this fellow and see what you can do about either his behavior or things like that, or his ability to cope. And so we did things ahead of the game. We had that ability. Our smallness allowed us to do that. We didn't have to go through a lot of bureaucracy. We didn't have to ask permission from a lot of people. We just said, this is what we ought to do.
And I would assume that your ability to do that makes the bar a lot more of a collegial practice, and also much more of a practice where members are accountable to each other as well.
Without question. and they appreciated it. They'd let you know. The rest of the members would let you know that they appreciated whatever it was that got these things started. Larry Martin was another person with whom I collaborated with to start things, such as he and I started the fee arbitration. And, he was a very good criminal lawyer before he became a judge. And, of course, he has an exceptional judge for a daughter.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a lot of pride in that.
Okay, so how has the Collier County Bar evolved over the course of your career? Obviously, it's gotten bigger, but are there other things that have changed that you've seen throughout the years?
Sure. First of all, in the beginning, if you were interviewing a client who had will situation, he came down from New York or came down from Chicago, they tell you how their lawyers did things. They tell you about what their accountant would do. In other words, we didn't know anything. Whatever it was, they knew everything. Well, if you look at the bar today, there are so many fields in which we have excellent attorneys. We don't have to go back and ask somebody in Cleveland how to do something. The expertise among the lawyers is significant throughout. We don't have to go to Miami or Fort Myers for those types of things. There were a lot of law firms, not a lot, but there were several law firms from Fort Myers that had branches down here under different names. They represented the banks. They represented the large real estate companies. Now that doesn't happen. We've got not just out-of-town law firms that have put their people here, but homegrown law firms with homegrown lawyers who have all the expertise in the world, whether it's intellectual property, whether it's securities, whether it's criminal, whether it's matrimonial. The expertise is here, and we don't have to go out to other towns, to other cities to get those expertises.
Now, we may have already talked about this a little bit, but are there any major initiatives of the Collier County Bar that you can remember as pivotal in developing these traditions and making a lasting impact?
Well, certainly, I think the attorney wellness program is one of them. Judge Brody has, and she has won an award for this, a statewide award for this, a wellness program for mental health among all the lawyers in Collier County, free mental health help. We started something about 20 years ago, just a few lawyers and I, when we saw too many suicides of young lawyers. We had about 4 or 5 of them. It was terrible.
That's awful.
And so we got a bunch of lawyers together and said, look, there's going to be a couple of young lawyers or others who are going to fall through the cracks, and we're going to get a call. And I'm going to ask you to go talk to that person and get them to this particular doctor who will size them up and get them some help. And that worked. But it eventually, we had one loss not too many years ago, which resuscitated that type of program on a much stronger, more organized fashion, and Judge Brody did that. And we have about 10 people on the board, but we have classes for intake among lawyers doing the intake and lawyers doing the referral and getting to our paid psychologist who will treat you anonymously. Nobody will ever know about it other than that particular psychologist. For every single lawyer in Collier County. I think it's a marvelous thing. Mental help.
That is a marvelous thing. Okay, so if you could describe the Collier County Bar Association in just 3 words, and I know, John, that might be a little hard for you, but if you only had 3 words, what would it be, and how would you describe the CCBA?
Young, enthusiastic, and proficient.
I shouldn't have said what I said. That was amazing. I liked it. Okay, good.
Well, I didn't know that question was coming, but no, seriously. But that's the way I see the bar. We're a young bar. That vitality helps us be very good about things.
I agree.
We went to the luncheon today, right? And that lawyer was talking about NIL and everything else. But you look around at the bar, and everybody is, one, enthusiastic, and they're pretty young. There's a whole few old coots like me there. And they're all in different expertises. I think that's just to have grown through that over the last 53 years, to see people do that. And also, when you realize that you see people that are young who came in after you and now become judges, it's terrific. I mean, I get a big kick out of it anyway. I just do.
I really like those 3 words that you used to describe the bar. That was excellent. Okay, let's talk about service and pro bono work. So you've done a lot of service and pro bono work over the years. Yeah. What was it that drove you to do that type of work? A fundamental appreciation for what a lawyer can do in a town. It's really that simple. I dreamed of that, actually, when I got out of New York City, where you're going to have no impact at all, and thought that I could create a program or work on a program. I think I've been involved in at least a dozen different types of charities. And, you know, the lawyer, when he or she becomes involved in that charity, eventually that charity is going to rely on that lawyer all the time. Whether it's a problem or whether it's a question of leadership, they look to the lawyer. Yeah.
And I keep on telling that to young lawyers. Get involved in these type of things because, first of all, you'll build your practice if you're any good. And two, you will have done a tremendous service to the community, because people have some fear about lawyers, but when they see lawyers in action on their behalf, on a societal level, it's a marvelous contribution.
Is there a particular pro bono case or service project that you've worked on that stands out in your mind?
Well, pro bono. First of all, I've been involved with the neighborhood health clinic for the last 25 years or so, 26 years. Helped start it. There's one remaining board member who started with me, Dr. Paul Jones, and the Lashide family started it, and I'm very much involved with that. But I'm still doing that. It provides medical services to working people who have low income and do not qualify for insurance, but they've got to be working. And it's it's been awarded in Washington with the president and stuff like that. But I was head of the Y when it was really about to fall apart, and we were able to raise a whole lot of money to get it back on its feet. What was at one time the Fine Arts Society, now it's United Arts or something like that. We put on all those concerts down at the Cambria Park, the best being the Whalers, when the crowd was so big it was across the street. And it was a terrific time to do those things. And Kevin Rambosk was then a community relations officer. Of course, he's sheriff now. See what the music can do for you.
Yeah.
There was a whole bunch of other things. That was president of the chamber. That was probably the only trial lawyer ever to be president of the chamber.
Yep.
But business people don't particularly want trial lawyers around them.
Yeah.
And we did. In fact, I led them on a membership drive. They had over 2,000 people. They've never had that many in the past, or and probably not even in the future. But we had an award-winning chamber. There are several other things that I was involved with. Started some kind of a boys' club. There were a bunch of things that I was pleased to be involved in, and to leave a mark of having improved whatever it is that you got involved into.
All right, let's talk about some reflections and advice, a lot of which will pertain to younger lawyers here. What advice would you give to a young lawyer who's just beginning their career in Collier County?
1, get involved with the bar, both the local bar and the state bar. Just get involved with a committee, statewide and otherwise. You need to develop some pride in what you do as a lawyer, and that's one way of doing it, and you're contributing. 2, be prepared. There's nothing worse than a young lawyer who's not prepared when he goes to court. Be prepared. And 3, listen. Listen to your client. If you listen to your client, you will be prepared. And then you have to be patient.
Now, along those lines, what qualities do you believe make a lawyer great, not just good?
Well, I think I've articulated it, right?
I think you did.
They listen.
Yep.
Really, great lawyers listen. And it's hard because usually you start talking and telling people all about everything and not listening to what they have to say, and then figuring it out. And they are always prepared. I mean, take a look at a guy like Ed Sheffy. I mean, is there a person more prepared than Ed Sheffy? And is there a person who does a better job? I won't say that nobody does a better job than Ed. I'm just saying he does the best job among others who do great jobs. And I think that's a great example. If you can do something, be like Ed.
Yep. And Ed always says, he who works the most usually wins.
Well, yeah, generally.
All right. Is there something that you know now that you wish that you had known at the start of your career?
I don't know. Probably. Well, I think you got to know yourself. And sometimes you don't know yourself. And you don't know what your abilities are that your mother kept on telling you. These are your abilities. And what you're capable of doing. If you don't, You don't want to limit yourself. It's somebody, I've been listening to somebody lately who said, if you think it, you are. And if you don't think it, you aren't, or you can't. And I think you can do just about anything. Don't limit yourself. That's what I really think.
All right, now let's talk about some funny stuff. So every lawyer has a funny courtroom story. What's yours?
Well, at a time when we had more local television, a lot of our cases were televised, or there was a lot of news, television on the news of whatever case you had. And back in the 80s, there were a fair number of narcotics cases and stuff like that. And I was doing a lot of criminal law at the time. And I can remember them coming in, and if they didn't show you on the face, they showed you from the rear. And my kids would look at the television, and from the back of my head, they could say, "There's Dad." Why? Because he was bald up there. That's right. Well, I was involved in this one case with Judge Brousseau, and Judge Brousseau had made some unusual rulings. And in my enthusiasm to argue against that particular ruling, I started to get up out of the chair. This is on television. And the entire chair flipped backwards. and I landed on my back. And that's probably the most ignominious moment in court. And I've had some embarrassments in court, but that was probably the most ignominious one, and also the funniest one.
What's one thing that people would be surprised to learn about you outside the area of law?
Well, I had some interests. I like to cook. I like to travel. I played in the band in high school and in college. I played trumpet. I played piano. In fact, even that was funny. I remember having to give a final concert, and I'm not one for, I have to read music. I can't do it by ear. And so I gave this one final concert, read the music, and it was an applause. And then they wanted an encore. Well, I didn't know any encore, so I played the same piece all over again. That was the only thing I could do. But I enjoyed those. I enjoyed those things, and I really enjoyed my kids growing up. I have a great wife who was a great mother, and between her and my secretary Susie, who was with me for 44 years, they made me have the ability to go out and do things and get to the games or do the extracurricular things I needed to do and cover for me.
Now, these are legacy interviews, so is there anything that you'd want to say to your children? You have amazing children, two of which are here locally, I believe,
right.
And they're all very successful in their own right. So I know that you're an amazing family man and a great father. Is there anything that you want to say to your children?
Yes, be like your mom, you know. Be as hardworking as your mom. She's a hardworking person. You know, my daughter, when she gave a speech in high school, I told her to always count all your strokes. You know, you want to be as honest as you possibly can to yourself. I had a professor in college that said, virtue is its own reward. And that's hard. Like instead of wanting something for doing something right, virtue is its own reward. And I've tried to live by that. I certainly have my foibles. I do have a temper. And I'm very fortunate to have been guided by certain people. One was a professor in college, and my grandfather was a very big influence on me, the one that was here. And he set the tone for community involvement. And that's really what I think people should aspire to do, is to be involved in their community.
We talked about being virtuous and community involvement. And so we may have already touched on this question a little bit, but when people look back on your career and your involvement with the Collier County Bar, what is it that you hope that they remember about you?
That I gave it my all and everything. You know, I was on the Board of Governors for 10 years for the Florida Bar. I was on the Judicial Qualifications Commission for 6 years. All of those things are a result of my bar involvement. You could not just do that on your own. You don't get there. Working with the bar, working with your fellow lawyers propels you to do those things. And that's really what I think lawyers should aspire to do.
All right, finally, if you could leave one piece of wisdom for lawyers of the future generations, what would that one piece of wisdom be?
Be true to yourself. Know yourself and be true to yourself.
Okay. And John, I noticed that you have a couple of notes there. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would like to touch on as part of this legacy interview series, whether it deals with the Collier County Bar, the Inns of Court, professionalism, or anything in your personal life?
No. And we did not rehearse this.
No?
But no, you probably asked me the questions I thought you may want to answer, and if there wasn't one, I added it anyway.
No, that's good. That's good. This is the. I always love hanging out with you, and I hope that other people will have the opportunity and experience to talk to you as well, because you've had an amazing career.
Oh, thank you.
And you've always been somebody that I've looked up to as a lawyer, and I think that there are a lot of other lawyers that look up to you as well.
I appreciate that. I was serious when I said I really enjoyed seeing you in the neighborhood as you grew up and became a very successful and respected lawyer.
Well, I certainly appreciate it. And that will end our legacy interview series with John Cardillo. We appreciate you tuning in. And John, as always, we thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to many, many more years together.
Pleasure to be here.
All right.
And privilege.
Thank you.